Welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening to the next episode, and today we're going to focus on what it takes to kind of inherit and grow a business. We'll talk about some successes, some failures, and some lessons in leadership with an actual president of a company. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Kyler Mason. Kyler, welcome
Hey
to the
there.
show.
Great to be on.
So we've barely met each other. We've talked about our kids for about 30 seconds. Why don't you take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, and then introduce your company to everybody?
Sure. I'm Kyler. I've got two young boys and a wife. They are 18 months apart, so we've got our hands full. Born and raised in Indy, have really just like moved around the 465 loop my whole life from college and work. Went to University of Indianapolis, played baseball there. Came out of school immediately looking for something to do in marketing. I think I'm one of the few people that went to school for a marketing degree and actually ended up doing marketing. So worked for a large SEO firm right out of school and started to get the itch to do a little bit more, broaden my experience a bit so that I had the tools that it would take to run my own business. So before coming to Element3, I remember interviewing with our current founder here and CEO, and I told her, which was super naive, I think, and lack of experience of me. I was like, I'll probably only be here for 5 years, and I'm going to aim to start my own thing. Told her that I planned to crush it and do great, but had other big plans. But here I am, 11 or 12 years later, and was able to really realize the goal that I had through Element3, which was become an owner and run a company. So that's a very compressed story or journey, but that's kind of how I ended up where I am.
So what does Element3 do? Let's start there.
We're a marketing firm, and we work with manufacturers that sell through dealer distribution. And what does that mean? Think like RVs and boats and commercial vehicles. So there's a space that we found that we're really good at serving clients, really across the full spectrum of marketing consulting to execution. We'll help clients with research, with strategy, all the way through helping them build their websites, really build and refresh their brands, to ad campaigns, all things like that. So pretty full service for the niche that I was telling you about.
So you get out of college, you go to work for an SEO firm, you end up switching over to Element3. What was your first position at Element3?
Oh man, I was our first digital marketing associate, I think. So
Okay.
I was kind of like the shiny object when I started because there wasn't really much digital marketing expertise in house.
Right.
That like felt kind of cool at the beginning, and then really realized like we needed to build up the practice, bring in people that knew way more than I did.
Okay. And then how long did it take you to progress up?
So I fairly immediately was interested in being the point person for our accounts. So I remember talking to the leadership team like, "Hey, I gotta run accounts. I can do this." And I'm this like baby out of school, and they're like, "That's cute."
Did they pat you on the head too?
Yeah, like go back and get on the internet. Um, so I was begging for the feedback of like, tell me what I have to do to get into the position to run accounts, because I wanted the control over the good things and the bad things. I wanted the good calls and the bad calls. I wanted to grow a book of business, and I'm like a competitive person, played sports and all that. So the idea of having a book of business and growing it and having like healthy, fun competition with the other like leaders of accounts and client relationships was intriguing to me. So eventually they were like, okay, you can do it. My title was actually a digital account executive. I didn't get all the way to account executive. And that was my way in, and eventually ran accounts for a few years. Then actually came back to the digital marketing team and led the digital team as a paid media director, and then the VP of digital. And I came back to accounts from there and was the VP of Account Services, and worked my way into president from there.
So how long did it take you to dash back and forth before you became president?
Oh, you're going to test my memory of the timing here. I think it was like 7 years, something like that.
Okay.
7 or 8 years.
And so you've been president for like 3-4 years?
Yes, officially president with the title for I think 2 or 2.5 years,
Okay.
and then I think 2 years, and then we're an EOS company, and in EOS there's a integrator and a
Yep.
visionary. I've been the integrator for I don't know, probably 3-ish years.
Okay. All right. So you spend 7-8 years bouncing back, obviously asking to do more than you're currently doing, or more than other people believe you can do possibly. When did you realize that you didn't want to go start your own thing in the midst of your bouncing back and forth? What was it that made you say, I don't need to do my own thing, I can just keep growing here?
I think over time I started to learn that like I didn't want to start something by myself. That like my I think my personality like learned that about myself. So the the shininess of starting by myself, bootstrapping something, um, sort of to wane, and then also alongside that, Tiffany, the founder
Hmm.
of the company, and I just had been talking for a while about um, the opportunity of ownership. So that really started to come into picture and became my focus. And I I'd say just less obsessed with jumping ship and doing it on my own.
So when you took over, you already had 7 years experience in the company, 8 years experience in the company. What were you surprised that you didn't understand when it became your responsibility to make decisions?
um, there's so much that I didn't understand. I think one of the biggest things was finding my footing in going from peer to leader manager with the executive team. Um, and I felt an unbelievable amount of support in going through that transition. So it wasn't like it was a really difficult move that brought me a lot of like fear in that, but still, it was a different dynamic. And I never, I think, fully understood the gravity of like having the kind of the final say and the direction of the company. I think from afar, before being in that seat, it's like, why don't you just make that decision? Why don't you do that quickly? This seems obvious, and that was naive of me too, because now I'm here, and they're big decisions. We've got almost 40 people that work here, and they rely on you to make the right decisions and make them at the right time. And I think that to your question, I didn't fully understand how much responsibility there is in that.
It's interesting that you say that. Obviously, you guys are an EOS company, and so there's a lot of formal process and there's structure, and there's actually a fairly high level of knowledge sharing that goes on. A lot of the people that listen to the podcast are aspiring or new business owners, and they don't have that structure around them. And I think the unknown unknowns in their case, right? Because they have that entrepreneurial seizure where they're like, I'm doing marketing for somebody else and they're getting all the money and I'm just getting paid. I'm going to go do it on my own. And then they get out there and they get surprised by the sheer volume of decisions that are required.
Hmm.
Because when you're an employee, like you said, you're just like, hey, just decide this because you're only seeing that one piece of the puzzle. But once you're the leader, it's like, oh, there are 17 pieces in this puzzle. Now I get it.
True.
So that's interesting. What other stuff besides just the scope and responsibility what was surprising to you?
One of the big things that I took on in moving into running the company was really clarifying our strategy. And I think there's a lot of surprising components in that I could unpack. So let me just kind of like give some context. We a few years back were very much focused on serving a large population of companies across, let's say, tech and professional services and manufacturing, all these things. And we spent some time over the past few years like clarifying our own business strategy and defining who our ideal customer profile is, And I'd say that seemed clear to me that we needed to do that exercise. What was surprising inside of it is how incredibly difficult the process was from A to B in um, in the things like leadership and communication and change management. And it's still incredibly hard. We're like nowhere near finished. I don't think we'll ever be finished. And so it was surprising to me to like how hard it was just to get the executive team all on the same page, and then you got to get your director level all on the same page, and then the whole company, and the rate of like consumption of information is different. And I'm not the I would say I'm not the greatest with laying out a giant change management plan. So the people around me really help to pull that off. And I'd say in thinking about the last couple of years, that was probably the biggest surprise is how difficult change really is.
Yeah. Well, and then you have the complication. You're not a family owned business, but you're kind of a second generation owner because Tiffany's founded it and you kind of stepped in as the leader. So what kind of pressures did that add? Because you're not the only person that goes through that. In fact, I'm three interviews this week are with people that have taken over from founders.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the pressures are definitely there. I feel incredibly supported by Tiffany. We still have a very collaborative relationship. She still works in the business on some things with special projects and helps with some responsibilities. I feel like the pressures are self imposed because I we have a plan. We have a in EOS. There's a VTO, and that suggests that we have things we need to accomplish in 3, 5, 10 years. And I feel a sense of responsibility to make those things happen because that's ultimately what led Tiffany to say, yeah, I'll put you in this position. I'll trust you with being a co-owner because I think that you can help me get there. So the responsibility and the pressure is to make that happen. And I take a very active role in communicating with Tiffany all of the time about like here's the progress we're making, here's where I see risk, here's the opportunity that I think that we need to lean into. So I think that that's a tool that works well with us because she wants to be in the know, and her perspective, especially as she gets to be an outsider now a little bit, is really helpful because she's been in the seat that I'm in, but can also share a perspective that I may not have being in the trenches every day.
Yeah. So obviously your kids are younger and you have other friends that are probably thinking about starting businesses.
Mhm.
When they come to you and say, what's it like to run a small business versus being a cog in the big corporate wheel? But how would you describe what it is to be a business president slash owner slash leader? What's the difference between that and being an employee?
It's the like duty and responsibility, like to the business and to the people. I think the weight of that is just you cannot experience it unless you have it. Um, and there's there's no such thing as like in my world. I'd say like turning it off. You're you're thinking about um, the opportunities that you're trying to take advantage of, the people you're trying to serve and grow, the risk you're trying to manage all of the time. It's not like on the weekend. It's like done. Um,
Yeah.
so it's always on, and I think I knew that the always on part when I signed up for it because I kind of was like that anyway. But then the the added, I'd say, just responsibility is one that I knew was coming, but you just don't know what it feels like till you have it.
Yeah. It's funny, there are some patterns in 82 episodes or whatever we're at. One of the patterns is things I wish I knew. There's a lot of people that just say financial literacy, just different.
Mm,
You're just looking at a different set of numbers. Or culture has come up a bunch,
mm.
right? And you don't expect that, but probably the strongest commonality between all the business owners and presidents has been the importance they place on their people and the responsibility they feel towards. And you brought it up early. You're like, I got all these decisions, and I'm responsible for the direction of 40 people's careers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the non-business owners don't realize the weight that having 40 people trust you for a paycheck actually imposes.
Yeah, it's totally different than when you're just a salaried employee. And
When you just know the paycheck's showing up on the 15th and the 30th, it's no big deal.
right, that's just the way it works. um, that is, you brought up like the other surprises. So Element 3 is an open book financials company. So um, I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and then coming here was, I think, a gift to be able to have exposure to our P&L for years. So if I could give any advice, like I think leaning on financial literacy and training to your whole company, and to those that are hungry that want it, is only really going to benefit you. You open up, there's a line of transparency that's tough to manage sometimes, but when things are good, people know, and when things are bad, people know, and you'll get the creative thinking and helpful problem solving um, from your people when you're transparent, and they're learning the numbers in a way that I think benefits everyone. So my transition to leadership and president and ownership wasn't really that difficult from a literacy of P&L and financials because of the training and past however many years.
Yeah, and that is an excellent thing. The open book. We've had a number of companies over the years that have used that system, and they've really trained it. I think the financial literacy piece for a lot of the interviews have been people that were starting their own company, and they had the entrepreneurial seizure from the E-Myth, and they made the decision, you know what, I'm going to go do this on my own. And next thing they know, they thought they were just balancing a checkbook, and they
Yeah,
were really trying to understand the P&L, and those are two different things.
yeah. Trying to manage QuickBooks without knowing
Yeah,
anything. Oh man, that
yeah,
sounds awful.
yeah. And all of a sudden, you got these categories and these subcategories and these classes, and how do I categorize this, and what do I do? And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I always, the best advice I give small business owners is spend a lot of money on your accountant and don't go cheap on your lawyer. And as long as you do those two things, they'll give you the advice you need.
yeah, yeah.
So if 2024 Kyler could go back 2.5 years to when you became president and say, hey, listen, 2022 Kyler, as you take over, here's the first thing you should focus on. What's the first thing that you should do when you take charge of a company, when you take charge of a group of people? Where should people put their focus? Where should you have put your focus?
Yeah. I kind of mentioned this before. I try to do a lot by myself, and I think I learned, I think thankfully very quickly, that the the involvement of key people on my team and then the broader company earlier would have been actually a time saving move. And I thought at the beginning, like I'm going to define our strategy, I'm going to define these things, and that will be quick, and then we can change. That is insane. And trying to you know turn the ship in a direction, of 40 people and history of 20 years of the way we did things, to a new direction. The advice I'd give is like you need to involve more people and respect what is difficult about change management, um, in a way that I just didn't know.
Yeah, that's yeah. So one of the lessons that we talk about in training is small business owners pay an awful lot of people to not use their talents
Mm-hmm.
because they give them a job and then they don't give them any responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a talented team, you ought to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. That's I think a part two of the, if I could go back, and what I'm trying to work on now is how to effectively delegate and reassign responsibility. And that's a process that I think you've got to be going through all of the time, not just only when you're growing. So things that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing. There's things that I should be doing that I'm not doing, and I think that's an area that I still need to get better at.
Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast. The guy talked about ADD for business owners.
Hmm.
So every time you do a task, you got to ask yourself, can I automate this? Can I delegate this? Or can I delete this?
Hmm.
And if it's one of those three, then you don't do it. You either automate it, get somebody else to do it, or just delete it so it doesn't need done.
Right.
And if it's not one of those three, then you got to actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We try to here when we add a new thing, try to in the organization remove another thing. You can
Yeah.
just incrementally add things to the calendar and processes and reports, and then you're just in full-time admin mode, and you're managing the beast versus sort of driving it. So that's the thing we try to do when we try to make improvements or add processes and things like that.
That's good. All right. So that's a quick 23 minutes, but any closing thought for somebody who's a new or aspiring business leader?
So we talked briefly about EOS.
Yeah.
If I find myself in a position where I'm just gonna start the next thing, or talking to a friend about starting the next thing, even if you're a one person show, I would adopt an operating system like EOS to keep you focused and organized and disciplined. The entrepreneurs can be, they can be crazy and have a million ideas and lose focus and really not tackle the most important things. So my tactical suggestion would be find a system that can manage you, and I think it's really helpful to adopt early.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That's great advice. Well, I think that's a good place to close up. So before we wrap up, I'm going to remind everybody you want to learn more about Kyler or Element 3. You can go to the show notes at defaultprofitable.com, and there's going to be information there. 3 ways you can help to grow the podcast. First, leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Second, hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And finally, if you hear something interesting, share it with somebody you know that would also be interested. Uh, Kyler, thanks again for being a guest.
For sure. Thank you.
And for all our listeners, we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.